In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate the Java string array. And what that does is simply would allow us to declare, populate, and iterate through a Java string array. We'll also throw in a loop, and I'm going to make sure that we use the for loop in this example so it'll make more sense as we move forward with arrays. These are very powerful coding techniques in Java, and you'll use them quite often when you program in Java. So let's go ahead and open up our Java Eclipse editor. So once we are in our Eclipse editor, let me go ahead and just create a new class. Right click on our Java introduction folder, choose new, and then click on class. And let's call this test array 5, just a name. Click finish, and here's our public class called test array 5. Next, let me go ahead and just do the public or static void, just setting some properties, main, and then our string with an empty array, command line argument, and open our curly braces. So by this time, you should be pretty comfortable with setting these initial properties for the public class. Next, I'm going to, let's say, put a comment here. So declare a string array with an initial size. So just setting the initial size for the array, and I'm going to choose string, the brackets, and let's go ahead and create something that relates to our school, for example. So let's have a list of items that can go in our school bag. So our school bag contains books, pencils, notebooks, erasers, and so on. So I'm just going to create a string of array here for the school bag, and I'm going to equal this to new string, and the items, or the number of items that are going to be part of this string array, I'm going to place, let's say 3, or let's say 4 items for now. Put a semicolon, and next comment would be add the elements to the array. So my first element for the school bag, and this will be at the position 0, equals, it contains books. Now, an important concept here before I move forward. Notice I used the 0 as the first position of the array for this element. So you have to remember this, because whenever you call this array or you reference to this element, you need to reference to 0. So it always starts with a 0, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So for instance, if I have this word called books, right? So the first letter of books is B, and the position is 0 for B, O for 1, next O for 2, K for 3, and then S for 4. So in essence, it starts with a 0. So that's the important point I wanted to mention here. So the next element, school bag, would be 1, and this would equal, let's say, pens. And of course I need my semicolons at the end. And my third element, let's say, would be at position 2, and let's give it a name called pencils. And our last, or the fourth element, school bag, and this is at position 3, right? So let's not get confused. I explained that. And we have, let's say, notebooks. Perfect. So now that we have the elements of the array, we can declare the string array and initialize the values in one single step. So for instance, if I were to do string for the empty array and then use the school bag 2 and make this equal to the curly braces, I'm going to call it books, pens, and I'm just listing out the same elements. So use pencils, comma, and then of course our notebooks. Close the parentheses and put a semicolon. So again, we simply declare a string of arrays and initialize with values in this one single step. And of course I need the curly braces at the end, so our syntax remains correct. There we go. And next, once I have the information, right, so I've created this string array. Next, I can iterate, for example, all the elements of the array. So I can set up something like int size equal to schoolbag 2.length, semicolon, and do a printout. So system.out.print, and I'm going to say the size of array is, and then of course the size variable. I can also throw in a for loop if I need to additionally manipulate the string. So for example, I can say something like for int I equals 0, comma, and then I can say I is less than size, comma, and I'd like to increment the output here. Open our curly braces and do a system print. So system.out.print, and say something like index, the bracket quotations, then I'm going to use the plus I, and then also use the plus with another quotations at the end. Close the bracket, parentheses, but before we actually close the parentheses, we need to equal this to, let's say, the school bag, right? So I'm going to use plus school bag 2, and then our I within this array. Great. So let's fix up our syntax here. This is going to be lowercase I. And of course I need a semicolon after the size. Perfect. And fix this here, syntax. Great. So once we have the iterations of all the elements of the array, next would be the output, right? So we need to see what it looks like when we run this code. So let's go ahead and click on the Run Test Array 5. Brings up the Save and Launch dialog box. Simply click OK. And perfect. So the size of array is 4. And of course we get our index at 0 are books. So here's at 0 are books, and then 1 for pens, 2 for pencils, and 3 for notebooks. And let's fix up our code so we have a space here so it's easier to see and read as an output. And I'm also going to do the system.out.print \n, and again this would print out the array vertically instead of horizontally. So let's run it again. Click OK. It looks much better. So the size of the array again is 4, my index at 0, books, 1 for pens, 2 for pencils, and 3 for notebooks. So this way you can create a string array, initialize it, execute it, and then manipulate it. So hope this helps. Practice, and let's move to the next lesson.